top story takes us to occupied Kashmir, where Indian forces have martyred 3 more youth in the Rajouri district. The civilians were targeted during a cordon and search operation in Nowshera area of the district. Locals say the operation, launched by Indian troops 2 days ago, is still ongoing. The occupied valley has been reeling under Indian clampdown for the last 151 days. Thousands of Indian Muslims have held a rally against the controversial Citizenship Act in Kochi city of southwest Kerala state. 27 people have died in countrywide demonstrations against the new anti-Muslim law. Holding anti-Modi banners, protesters demanded a total withdrawal of the Citizenship Amendment Act. Students of Jamia Millia University held a candle march against the law in New Delhi. Meanwhile, the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur has started a probe against students for reciting Pakistani poet Faiz Ahmed Faiz's poem in protests. During the demonstrations, the students sang one of Faiz's iconic poems that infuriated Hindutva supporters. The Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, has arrived in Pakistan on a day-long visit. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan welcomed him at the Noor Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi. In a statement, Pakistan's Foreign Office said the leaders will hold a one-on-one meeting in Islamabad. It said during the meeting, both will discuss bilateral, regional, and global issues of common interest. The statement also said the visit illustrates the strength of Pakistan-UAE ties based on faith, culture, and cooperation. Let's move on now to the U.S. envoy to Afghanistan, John Bass, who has said the winner of the Afghan polls will not have a commanding mandate with a close win. The envoy said Ashraf Ghani must approach the win with humility and govern inclusively. In an interview, Bass said getting fewer than 1 million votes with 9 million registered voters can be problematic. Speaking about the peace talks, Bass said U.S. is not insisting on a nationwide ceasefire with the Taliban before any deal in Doha. He said a ceasefire is more important to the people of Afghanistan, who are dying in the conflict. On to Iraq now, where protesters have withdrawn from the U.S. embassy in Baghdad 2 days after thousands stormed the compound. Iraq's military said the demonstrators' tents have been removed from the diplomatic green zone. Protesters withdrew after Hasht al-Sha'abi paramilitary forces ordered them to leave. Hasht claimed the security forces inside the embassy fired tear gas, wounding 20 demonstrators. The protests began in response to U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria on Hezbollah targets, killing at least 25 people. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has postponed his Ukraine visit to monitor the security of Americans in the Middle East. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he would ask Parliament to give him immunity from prosecution in the graft cases. Netanyahu was indicted in November on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Addressing a press conference, Netanyahu said he was falsely indicted while actual criminals are free.
I intend to ask the Knesset Speaker, according to the Article 4, to let me implement my right, my duty, my mission to continue serving you for the future of Israel.
Sticking with Yemen, southern separatists have pulled out of committees implementing a pact to end a regional power struggle. The power-sharing pact, known as the Riyadh Agreement, was reached in Saudi Arabia in November after indirect talks. The power conflict in southern Yemen opened a new front in the country's multifaceted war. Under the deal, the separatists were to join a new national cabinet under control of the internationally recognized government. The Southern Transitional Council has said it had withdrawn in protest against violence in Shabwa province, blaming it on the Islah Party. Well, now let's move on to Yemen, where Houthi rebels have released 6 Saudi prisoners as part of UN-mediated efforts to end the 5-year war. A spokesperson for the Saudi-led coalition has confirmed the release and said the prisoners have arrived in Riyadh. The UN has welcomed the release that was helped by the International Committee of the Red Cross. In November, Saudi Arabia freed 128 Houthis and returned them to Sana'a. The conflict has killed tens of thousands of people and has pushed millions to the brink of famine. In other news, the Turkish parliament will vote today on deploying troops to Libya, following a request by the UN-backed government. Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay says the government expects Parliament to back the measure. The motion provides a one-year mandate to deploy ground troops, arguing the crisis in Tripoli threatens Turkey's interests. It identifies Ankara's Mediterranean shipping and businesses as its main interests. The draft motion says sending troops to Libya will prevent mass illegal migration. Earlier, Turkey and Libya's government of national accord signed a military and maritime deal. Taiwan's military chief and 7 others have been killed in a helicopter crash. The Defense Ministry says General Shen Yiming was on a routine mission to visit soldiers at a military base in the northeastern Yilan County. It said 13 people were on board when the aircraft made an emergency landing. 5 others have been rescued. The Defense Ministry earlier said 10 of the 13 people on the aircraft were found alive. It said an investigation is underway to determine whether the cause was environmental or mechanical. President Tsai Ing-wen's office has announced that she will cancel all election campaign activities for 3 days after the tragedy. In news coming out of Hong Kong, 400 people have been arrested during protests on New Year's Day after a pro-democracy march of tens of thousands spiraled into chaos. The arrests take the total number of detainees to 7,000 since protests in the city escalated in June. In a briefing, Senior Superintendent Nek Lok Chun said the arrests were made for unlawful assembly. He said officers warned protesters not to throw hard objects, including bricks, paint bombs, and water bottles.
So as of now, police have made around 400 arrests. Offenses include unlawful assembly and possession of offensive weapon.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed concern over Pyongyang's intention to resume nuclear and missile tests. Earlier, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had called for offensive measures to ensure the country's security. In a statement, spokesman Stefan Dujarric hoped the tests would not resume, in line with Security Council resolutions. He said non-proliferation remains a fundamental pillar of global nuclear security and must be preserved. Dujarric said diplomatic engagement is the only way to sustainable peace. Talks on denuclearizing the Korean peninsula have stalled after breaking down in Hanoi at the beginning of last year. In Austria, the People's Party has struck a coalition deal with the Greens to bring the left-wing party into government for the first time. The deal comes 3 months after the APP's conservative leader, Sebastian Kurz, won a parliamentary election. This report has the details.
The Austrian government is finally getting a foothold after the disintegration of its previous coalition forced snap elections last year. The new deal strengthens its hand to pass its long-awaited tax reforms. Under the agreement, Sebastian Kurz will be the chancellor, while the Green leader Werner Kogler will become the vice-chancellor. Kurz said the new government will reduce the tax burden and equalize the tax system.
Frankly, these negotiations on the government were not easy because both parties are based on very different foundations. But in my opinion, we achieved an excellent result. We managed not to limit ourselves to minimalist compromise, but instead to forge the best of the two worlds.
The Greens will control 4 of the 15 ministries under the agreement. Kogler said his party is focused on making environment-friendly laws.
Austria will, I believe, have the most intense and largest transparency packages in recent decades, with an offensive towards free information and, if you wish, toward a transparent state.
With this coalition, Austria has joined fellow European Union member states, Sweden and Finland, by having the Greens in government.
In Australia, thousands of residents and tourists along the New South Wales south coast have started evacuations as the threats of bushfires rise. Authorities have declared the coast a tourist leave zone for hundreds of kilometers. Long queues choke supermarkets and petrol stations as people stock up supplies to survive and escape. Meanwhile, a closure of major roads is causing traffic jams on the handful of available escape routes. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said the government will do all it can to prevent any further loss of life.
The priority today is fighting fires and evacuating, getting people to safety. What is incredibly important is that we continue to maintain the focus on these very important tasks. Those tasks are being well led and run by our state authorities, both in Victoria and in New South Wales, and I am in constant contact with premiers of both of those states.
And coming up next in this news bulletin, a glove puppet show has lured audiences in Egypt. And T-cell therapy cures infants' genetic illness. The death toll from floods has risen to 21 after torrential rains caused landslides in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. Disaster management officials say the death toll may rise. Officials said people died from drowning, hypothermia, electrocution, and being buried by landslides. They said 30,000 people have been forced from their homes by rising rivers, flooding at least 90 neighborhoods. The city's main airport has suspended operations. In the U.S., a still experimental T-cell therapy has been used to treat a genetic illness in an infant. It helped Johan's immune system fight off viruses after he received a bone marrow transplant.
When a person's immune system is impaired by a genetic disease called chronic granulomatose, a bone marrow transplant can be a powerful therapeutic tool. But there is a serious problem. During the first few months, the recipient's defenses against viruses are severely weakened. It's hoped a still experimental type of treatment called T-cell therapy can help protect the patient during this vulnerable period.
Where we can take T-cells from a bone marrow transplant donor, pick out the ones that fight viruses, and then give them back to a bone marrow transplant recipient after transplant to boost up their immunity against several viruses.
After 20 years of clinical trials, it's being used to treat more and more patients, many of them children. Among them is a boy named Johan.
Not silly smile. Those type of things are experimental. You also have to weigh the pluses and minuses.
But many hurdles remain. The costs.
Bone marrow transplant is, it's 50 years old in the U.S. It's still not entirely clear what will happen to the patients when they're older adults. We very much hope that it will be a lasting cure for all the children that we apply it to.
The costs can run into many thousands of dollars. At the moment, these factors are limiting the procedure to some 30 medical centers in the United States.
In Egypt, even in the era of on-screen entertainment, a simple glove puppet show is pulling in the audiences. Puppeteers provoke peals of laughter from spectators, mainly children, by performing stories with a thought-provoking moral. More now about the cultural puppet shows in this report.
Outspoken, stubborn, and mocking, the puppet Aragos has long been seen as a reflection of popular Egyptian society. The squeaky-voiced glove puppet with a red conical hat and a thin mustache was listed as part of the planet's intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO in 2018. Veteran puppeteer Sabri Matale performs from behind a portable booth, moving two puppets, one on each hand. The tales date back to Ottoman times, showing how wits and skill defeated the thuggish and the corrupt.
Argos isn't a toy for something to make fun of. Argos provides the audience with the power of laughter so they can laugh and be happy.
The troupe, comprising of 6 members, has been performing each week in Cairo for over a decade. They have been poking fun at government figures since the popular 2011 uprising.
Currently, many people are trying to get into this profession, especially after it's been recognized as a global Egyptian and Arabian art, and also after the verification of its roots and its importance regarding the topic it discusses.
Despite the crackdown on freedom of expression during President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's reign, the show is not censored.
Stock markets in Asia are trading mixed amid speculation over the expected U.S.-China trade deal. Investor sentiments are weak as the New York rally lacks momentum. The Shanghai Composite is trading over 1% higher after private surveys showed manufacturing activity rose in December. But Seoul's Kospi Index has lost nearly 1% as shares of Hyundai Motors has dropped. Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained nearly 1% as shares of life insurer AIA surged over 2.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 is trading 0.75% lower. Time to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here on Indus News.